Okay, this is Mac Bolan, and this evening for Banged Believers and Non-Believers group discussion, I'm going to cover healthcare. It's been a real hot button topic lately, and it's one of those issues full of emotion, mostly devoid of facts, people pointing fingers, people spouting nonsense, people getting hung up on arbitrary things that really don't even play into it. Kind of go and give a background. First off, one of the major problems when we talk about healthcare is that people tend to leave the economic portion out of it. And I know that's one of those things that people right away are going to say, "Oh my God, oh, you evil person." No, you know, it's not that simple. Everybody tries to make something simple in a situation like health and medical care, but it's not that simple. And to start right off, I'm going to say this. You have a right in the United States to medical treatment. You do not have a right to health care. That's a fact. You can walk into any emergency room in any hospital in this country, and you will not be denied medical treatment. On the other hand, when we talk about healthcare and health insurance, that's a totally separate subject. Now, the ACA was a disaster. It was poorly planned. It was one of those things that we shoved down our throats by former President Obama, something he wanted to kind of hang his hat on, trying to bring a version of healthcare to the country, you know, trying to follow up on some kind of warped version of the socialized medicine in other countries, which, quite frankly, if you know the facts, have a lot of problems. And I'm going to state it right now, right up front. Socialized medicine, healthcare, whatever the hell you want to call it, will never, ever, ever work in the United States. Ever. And I'll explain why. First of all, I'm going to go straight to the ACA, which has been an unaffordable disaster. It's unsustainable. People keep saying, don't take away my health care. Don't take that. Their goal was 110 million people to sign up, and they didn't even meet a third of that. Part of the problem was they imposed a tax burden, and they shoved this piss-poor legislation and made this a reality, screwed a lot of people. Oh, they say, oh, yeah, well, we insured blah, 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 blah amount of people. Yes, you did. But you also screwed a lot of people with the tax penalties and drove, particularly here in Illinois, right off the bat, within 2 years of the ACA being implemented, 3 of the largest health insurance carriers in the United States had to leave because it was unsustainable. They could not afford the costs. Now, the GOP plan sucks. It's no better. It sucks. The ACA sucked. The GOP plan sucks. Trump ran on a platform of repealment, which was the right thing. It needs to go away. The government in this country needs to get the hell out of health insurance. It's already been proven impossible to sustain. And this is a fact. And I don't care if it's Democrat, Republican, and I'm neither. I'm an independent conservative. The fact is the cost to try and provide health care by the government in this country cannot be paid for. There's no such thing as free health care. And if you understand simple economics, and again, I say this is not just a medical issue, this is an economic issue. It can't happen. It can't be paid for. There is no way possible for the federal government to come up with a comprehensive and affordable plan for a country diverse in over 300 million people. Now, I hear the ignorant jackasses constantly say every Western country or developed country has this, has that. Bullshit. No, they don't. And if you knew the facts, you wouldn't say stupid shit. Here's the deal. You go to countries like Canada. Yeah, they got free health care, so to speak. It doesn't cover much. People still end up having to buy private health insurance because the government provided free insurance doesn't cover much of anything. And if you have a certain issue that maybe requires a specialist, you're going to get told, well, nah, you're going to have to pay for that out of pocket. Now, that's the same for other countries. You go to a place like Sweden or Denmark, and they talk about their free health care. No, it's not free. Those people pay income taxes that are anywhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 70% or higher. It's insane. You pay all of that. It's not free. And then on top of that, it's the same problem. The basic health care does not meet most people's needs. I mean, it doesn't cover the kind of thing like if you have cancer, you have this, or you require more, you still have to purchase a subsidized private health insurance policy. These are things you never hear. These are the facts that whenever we have the argument about, oh, well, Sweden or the UK, and the UK is just as broke, their system's just as bad off as some of the others. But people will continue to spout on about, well, look at this country. Look, okay, first of all, you cannot compare these dinky European countries, mostly homogenous like Denmark, to again, a country of over 300 million people, a diverse population, and quite frankly, the cost to fully implement a socialized medicine healthcare program like they have in Europe, in this country, would be absolutely catastrophic. The tax burden, and they say, oh, tax the wealthy, tax the corporations. No, it wouldn't even come close. The whole reason the ACA, also known as Obamacare, was put in and they tried to prop it up was based on tax penalties, forcing people to buy health insurance. And this is the problem. Now, it's not an issue that should be decided by the federal government. And I say again, socialized medicine will never, ever work in this country. Now, back in the 80s, there was a very decent plan proposed by the Republicans. It was a 30-30-30-10 proposal, basically meaning 30% of the cost would be bore by the employer, 30% of the costs would be bore by the insurance companies, 30% would be subsidized by the government, 10% would be assumed by the individual with a catastrophic cap based on income. Now, because it's a Republican plan, and back then the Democrats owned both the House and the Senate, they hated it. Never happened. Though it was probably one of the more saner and close to workable ideas, like an HMO back then. Now, if you really want to have affordable health care plans for everybody in this country, it's very simple. Get the government out of health care. Get them out. The ACA was a disaster, and as I said before, the GOP plan is bad, if not worse. Now, keep Medicaid. Medicaid serves a purpose. This is not about Medicaid, though. And I have two sons on Medicaid because they work part-time and cannot afford the ACA, so they were forced to apply for Medicaid. And just to clear up a few facts, one, the GOP plan does not eliminate pre-existing conditions. That's baloney. What it does is allow insurance companies to adjust rates for pre-existing conditions, which is basic economics. And if you understand insurance, the principles of insurance, which I'm going to go into here shortly, it makes perfect sense. Secondly, the GOP plan does not gut or rape or any of the other hyperbole that you hear the dumbasses speak about when it comes to Medicaid. It only restricts Medicaid expansion. I defy anybody out there to give me a number as to what specifically that means, as far as what point of income do they separate Medicaid from Medicaid expansion, because I haven't seen a single person, and I've seen some pretty stupid posts in this group about that already, who can give me a number. Now, there is a number that exists right here in Illinois that will tell you whether you're eligible for Medicaid or not. And if you're not eligible for Medicaid, then you have to go ahead and get raped by the ACA, which most people can't afford. And if you are unemployed or work part-time and at a certain level of income, then you are eligible for Medicaid. You have to apply for it. And by the way, folks, speaking from experience, if you do have to apply for Medicaid, don't even bother trying to do it online. If you don't physically go down to the social services center in person and fill the paperwork out, you ain't getting it. Okay, so let's go back to what I was stating about selling health insurance on the free market. Okay, if you allow health insurance companies, which they're not right now, to sell plans on the free market openly based on need and a variety, because obviously the healthcare needs of somebody who's 22 years old may not be the same as somebody who's 40 years old and has a family versus the 22-year-old who's single, maybe a college student, whatever. They're different. And this is one of the things that the ACA and the GOP plan, none of those will account for. Now, when we talk about economics and involving insurance, you have to understand insurance principles. And now I was a double major, history and business in college. My minor was economics, and I actually took a class called Principles of Insurance. To understand insurance, you have to understand things like risk factors. You have to understand things like rate adjustment. You have to understand things like pool. And that means the pool of the insured. Now, if you're buying automobile insurance, you know, obviously the rates are going to be different if you buy a Rolls versus, say, a Ford Escort. And it's the same thing. And as much as people are going to say, "Oh no, now you're talking about someone's life," no, bullshit. It still boils down to economics. And if you want a sustainable, affordable system, you have to take that into account. Now, the whole pre-existing condition thing, I think pre-existing conditions, nobody should be denied health insurance. But again, pre-existing conditions, insurance companies should be able to adjust their rates on. If somebody never had health insurance their whole life and then all of a sudden gets diagnosed with cancer and says, "Oh, well, now I need health insurance," a health insurance company should be able to adjust their rates accordingly. You know, I mean, that is a simple principle. And people can bitch and whine and moan about it all they want, but it's a fact. And if you really want affordable health care in the U.S., this is the route we need to go. And I say, allow healthcare companies to sell a variety of plans with adjusted rates, taking into account risks. And again, when I say taking into account risks, if I want to purchase flood insurance and I live in an area where I'm not near a lake or a river or whatever, and the the possibility of me experiencing a flood would maybe only be due to a heavy downpour of rain that causes my basement to flood versus somebody who lives across from a river in a floodplain. Yeah, that is an adjustable rate. And these are simple principles that if you want to talk about healthcare, you can't be an idiot and not understand. So, you want lower healthcare rates? You want affordable insurance? Allow insurance companies to sell a variety of plans on the open market. Competition will drive prices down. And I bring this up now. We talk about pharmaceuticals. And if any of you were paying attention to it, you could go back and look at the EpiPen, basically the disaster where a prick who ran a company who had no competition and was the only one providing that particular service jacked the price up to something that was ridiculous. And I mean, he got busted for it, thank God. But that's not competition. That's not free market. And people talk about big pharma, big corporations. That's not free market. And that's not what a true conservative or anybody who's really interested in affordable health care would stand for. The government should only be involved in a regulatory capacity. You want to ensure that there are numerous companies out there providing the same, so you want redundancy. And if you don't understand that word, look it up in the fucking dictionary. But you want redundancy. You want several companies providing the same service, be it medicine, be it services, be it health. That is what you want. You want to break up big pharmacological companies. You don't want mergers of several companies. Keep plenty of health companies out there. Keep plenty of pharmaceutical companies out there. Allow for competition. Allow for 3 or 4 companies to provide an EpiPen. And again, if you don't know what the EpiPen is, it has to do with epinephrine and something that basically inhibits allergic reactions. If you want an affordable EpiPen, then you have 4 or 5 providers providing it. That's what needs to happen. That is true competition. That is a true free market. The problem is with the government running healthcare, it's not. And companies are not allowed to set reasonable prices or provide a variety of services that would allow them to provide affordable health care plans. Now, again, I say you want competition, you want an open market to provide lower costs. And people say, well, how's that going to happen? Well, let me give a very simple example. And for some of you maybe who weren't alive back in the 70s or 80s, I'll just talk about the phone company, for instance, the Ma Bell monopoly. I remember days back when I had phone bills because of my long distance charges that were $400 to $700. Why? Because they could. Because there was no competition. One company could set the rates on everything. Now, if you go back to what happened, MCI, which was the first company that challenged what they called the Ma Bell, it was Ma Bell or go to hell. I mean, you had no choice. They challenged and they won, and all these companies sprung up. Now, ironically, MCI was the first casualty during the burst of the techno bubble back in the 90s. But if you look at what your phone bill is today, and I'm not even talking about wireless, but just a generic phone, you have free long distance, you have this, you have that. Phone bills are cheap. Why? Because of competition. Because you had companies like MCI, Sprint, Verizon, T-Mobile. I could go on and on and on. And even cable providers now that provide phone service in addition to internet service. Wireless plans, which, you know, God knows if there was only one carrier, imagine what your wireless plan would be like. But no, you have choice. Because you have competition, the costs on all that came down. And believe me, when I was talking about the $400 to $700 phone bills based on long distance charges, I'm not kidding. And anybody who was old enough to remember back then knows, I mean, your rates were insane. So applying that to healthcare, it is a logical outcome. If you have a market that is free and open, where companies are allowed to provide a variety of healthcare plans at adjusted rates, it will drive the costs down. Now, the second thing is, and another thing that you don't hear in about these socialized medical companies is the fact that when they're run by the government, it takes a lot of choice out of the doctor's hands. Now, some will say the same thing in if it's privatized, but again, if the costs and the competition is there, you're still going to have doctors pushing to do better. You're still going to have profit motive. You're going to have people who want to succeed, and costs will go down versus a socialized system where there's no incentive. And if you're Joe off the street in Sweden and you walk in and say, oh, well, I got this and that, and then the doctor says, well, according to these government rules and regulations, you don't fall into that category, so you're going to have to wait 2 years, or I can't do the procedure at all. And they're going to be, in the end, again, forced to go and purchase a privatized healthcare plan to subsidize the so-called free plan that ain't free, that they don't have. And again, if you don't believe me, look it up online. And Canada's going through the same problem right now, and I guarantee you, if you do your research, most Canadians, in fact, I would say the majority of Canadians, all purchase private health care to subsidize the so-called free health care that the government provides, because it really, on the bottom line, doesn't provide all that much. So I'm going to go ahead and end this here. I want to keep it brief. I want to keep it to the point. And I'm going to recap again. 1, socialized medicine, European models, or developing, use whatever, little catchphrase you want, will never, ever work in the U.S. Again, a country of over 300 million. And if you want to compare the size, healthcare in Russia and China are disasters. And those are both extremely large countries. But if you ever want affordable healthcare in the United States, we need to go to a free market system. We need competition. We need a system that works. The ACA isn't going to work. The GOP plan is not going to work. And in no conceivable way will socialized medicine ever work in this country, again, given the tax burden. And that's it. This is Mac Boland, and I hope you learned something from this. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Have a good evening.